Welcome back friends. In last video we had a quick look at JavaScript. This time I'm going to talk about CSS. Okay, so let's get started. Let me fire up my editor. So the first question that comes up in our mind is what actually CSS stands for. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, and the main purpose of using CSS is to describe how HTML elements are to be displayed. So when we say how HTML elements are to be displayed, that means it basically defines the styles and the look and feel of that particular HTML element. That's, for example, if we have a paragraph or if we have a header, how it should look. That is what CSS defines. Okay, so at the most basic level, it indicates that the order of CSS rules matter. So when I say order of CSS rule matters, it means the order that it is defined is important for the style sheet. So if you look at here, what we have, so cascading order. So first priority inline style, second priority external and internal style sheets, third priority browser default. Okay, so if a style is defined with same priority, the last one has the highest priority. Now, uh, so these all are actually theory, right? So let's start with the practical example. Okay, so let's quickly create a file index.html. Okay, and then we can use this editor where I can have simple HTML file and nothing here, and let's say I have a header which says hello CSS. Okay, and then I have a, for example, div, and inside that I have suppose p tag. Let's copy this multiple times. So for example, I have 4 paragraph tags, 2, 3 and 4, and let's say I have another paragraph tag here which has some lorem ipsum text. Okay, so this is like very basic HTML file that I have. Okay, so let's say I have this file saved in this folder. Okay, and let's fire up Google Chrome. Okay, and then in Google Chrome, let's say we load this file by dragging and dropping. We don't need any server because there is no server call or anything, so we can simply load this HTML file and we can see how it looks, right? Now if we, there is this arrow button here in our developer tool, you can see here. So this one is used to select any element in the HTML. Okay, so if you select suppose header, this gets highlighted here. Okay, and then at the same time you have styles defined here in the developer tool. Okay, so currently if you see, there are user agent style sheet, which is of course the browser style sheet. Okay, but there is nothing that we have defined, so we can, for example, define here color red, and you can see the color is getting changed to this. But so that is how you can, change the style of an element. But how to define the style? Okay, so there are three ways to apply a style in an HTML page. One is to add a link, say relation style sheet, and then we can have href and say suppose styles.css. So if you use link, this becomes external style sheet. The other way that we can define a style is to have a style tag. Okay, where we can define the style and this becomes internal style sheets. Why we say internal? Because this style sheet I have it inline here in this HTML page. Okay, and then third one is inline style sheet. When I say inline, it means specific to that particular element. Okay, here I can say color and then red, something like this. Okay, so for now let's start with inline. So I'll remove this one. I have set color red and refresh this HTML page. So now you can see the same effect is having here, the one that I had changed here. Okay, so now you can see color red here. If you turn it off, it's gone. Okay, so Chrome provides this utility and other browsers also where you can tweak with the style on the fly. Okay, all right. So when I was talking about the priority here, so this inline styles gets the priority one. So that means if you define a style like this gets the first priority. Okay. Then external and internal style sheets get the second priority. So it means the style being defined using link tag like this. Okay. href equals to styles.css relation equals to style sheet. Don't worry about what link is or the syntax. Okay, we'll cover it up in some other video later. So this way, this gets the second priority. So to demonstrate that, let's create one file called styles.css. Okay, now the point comes, what is the syntax of defining a style? Okay, so the syntax is you have selector, okay, and then we have property and then its value. Okay, so note the syntax here. So this part becomes the selector, then we have a curly bracket, then the style property, okay, and then value, and after that you have to put this semicolon. Okay, so this is basically how you define a style. Now how to comment a style in style sheet? You can use slash and then star and then closing. Okay, so this is how you comment out a style. Now to demonstrate what I was saying about the priority, so here the style is here, okay, color red for h1. Okay, so let's say h1, which becomes my selector, and then say color blue. The expected output would be red here if you refresh. Okay, because the inline style says red. Now if I say green here, okay, and you refresh the page, it becomes green. So this shows that inline style gets the higher priority. Now in that point we had third one, the browser default. What does this mean? So here if you see this h1, this is actually browser's h1. Okay, so you can see here inline style gets the priority first, and then second priority becomes this, but because inline got applied, so this one is unticked. Okay, so let's say I don't want inline, so you will see color gets blue here for the header, and if you untick this, it becomes the default one, that is this one. Okay, so that is what cascading order actually works. Okay, so what we looked till now is how you define this style, what is the syntax of the style definition, and in which order it gets defined. Okay, now we will talk more about the selector because this is very important to understand. So I have some cheat sheet kind of thing here which you can see here. So first one will cover the star. Okay, so star basically is not very much used, but this is something where once you define, it gets applied to almost all of the element. But again, because it's CSS, so it will apply based on the priority. So for example, here if I say, uh, let's say font color equals to red, okay, and then if you refresh the page, it applies the color on all of the font, but the header is still green. Okay, why? Because we have inline style color green which overrides the star. Okay, so let's remove this and let's see what happens. Okay, now this becomes blue because we have a h1 defined here. Okay, so if we remove this h1 also, then it becomes red. Okay, so star selector is something that applies as a root level. Okay, next one we have class selector. What is class selector? Okay, so the syntax for class selector is you have to put one dot and then you can put any name. So for example, I would like to say heading and then the curly bracket and then I say color and then blue. Now if you refresh here, nothing happens because this is a class and that you have to use it. And the syntax of using the class is in any element, HTML element, you have to say class and then the class name without dot. That is very important to understand. Okay, now if I refresh, you will see it becomes blue. Okay, so this is called class selector. For using the class selector, you have to have an attribute called class on an HTML element. Okay, next one is the ID selector. So we all know that ID is basically an attribute that we can define here. So for example, I say lorem, okay, and then ipsum, something like this. So this becomes my ID. Now in CSS, how you use the ID selector, you have to add a hash and then the name of the element. And then for example, here I say color green. Okay, and if you refresh the page, you will see that particular paragraph gets color of green. Okay, so this is basically the ID selector. Okay, next one is the element selector. So in HTML, all these tags that you see here, it's actually the element like body element, h1 element, p element, div element. Okay, so if we define something, so for example, for paragraph, I define background color. Okay, something like say green or yellow green, something like this. And if you refresh here, you will see that paragraph gets the background color of yellow green. Now this is very kind of generic because you said all the element that is of paragraph should have a background color of yellow green. Okay, so that becomes the element selector. Okay, next one is element comma element. So when I say element comma element, it means I can have another element for, let's say, h1 and then comma p. In this case, what will happen is this particular style will get applied. This particular style will get applied to h1 and p both. Okay, so let's refresh this and you will see both header and the paragraph has this particular style. Okay, so comma you can use for defining a style sheet, style for multiple elements. Okay, next one is element space element. So let's demonstrate this by creating another heading, let's say, and a paragraph. Let's say second heading. Okay, and refresh the HTML page. You will see second heading is there with yellow green as a background. Okay, now let's write h2p and then let's say color yellow or let's say blue actually and refresh it. So you will see this gets color of blue. So this element space element selector basically says select this element. In this case it's p tag. So select p tag which is inside the h2. Okay, so if for example I put a div here, sorry for spelling mistake. So if I put a div here and let's copy this, paste here and let's refresh. So still it is working because it is still inside h2. But if I change it to h3 for example and refresh, it won't work and it gets the color of red, and red color is coming from the root selector. Okay, so when you use space, it basically says any tag or any element or any selector that is inside this particular selector. So this P is an element selector, but it can be a class selector or an ID selector. So when I say class selector or ID selector, let's say I have dot heading, okay, color blue, refresh, nothing happens, okay, and I already have a color heading class, okay. So let's say I have a class equals to heading and then refresh. So now you see it got the blue color, okay. So now it's clear, right? So this particular selector should be inside this particular selector, okay. Now the next one is element greater than element. So this one is the greater than symbol, but in here it means a bit different. So let's remove the div tag for the moment, okay, and remove this class. All right, now let's create h2, then say p, then say color yellow. So you see the color has been changed. So this particular syntax that we have here, it says this p tag or p element which is inside the h2 but at the first level, very first level. So when I say very first level, now if I wrap this div in, if I wrap the paragraph inside the div and if I refresh, it won't work because this p is no more at the first level of h2, okay. So let's say I have another paragraph here and I have exclamations, okay, and refresh it. So in this case you will see this paragraph is actually getting the color yellow. So what it's the selector is saying that select all the p tag that is inside the h2 at the very first level, okay, not in the like nesting with any other element. So all the p tag that is at the first level here will be applied. This particular style will be applied to that element, okay. Now next one is the plus symbol, okay. So what plus does, okay, so in this case let's say uh, so plus basically defines that any, let's define the style first and then we'll see, okay. So I say h3 plus p and then color, let's say orange, red, okay. So this particular syntax says all the p tag, the not all the p tag basically. So the p tag that is immediately after h3 should get the this particular style. Okay. So let's define a h3 and then say third paragraph, third heading, and then immediately let's define the p tag, or let's yeah, and then third paragraph. Okay, and let's refresh the page. Okay, so we'll say third heading is here and the third paragraph is also here. Okay, so for the moment let's say this color, let's say something else, yellow green, okay, which won't be visible that much but you will see it has changed, okay, here. So what it means actually, so now if I put any other element here, let's say hello div, okay, what will happen, let's see. So now in this case you see this third paragraph, the paragraph tag doesn't have this particular style applied anymore, this particular one, because this paragraph is not the immediate element of h3, okay. So now this one should be clear to you. Now let's look at the hover over, okay. So let's start with the heading tag that we have, hello css, and let's say I have heading and then this is the syntax, hover and say color red, okay, and refresh the page. So now if you see as soon as I hover over this, it changes the color, right? Okay, so this is how hover works. Okay, next is first child and last child. As name itself suggests, this is more about selecting the first and last child. But to look at this, let's say I have a class here, p element. Okay, copy this class multiple times. Okay, and then let's define this style here. Okay, dot p element, it is class selector, and then let me actually remove this generic paragraph tag to make it better, and then say color red. Okay, so these paragraph has red color. Now what we are talking about is the first child and last child. Okay, so let's add first child should get the red color. So okay, now this root is actually overriding it, so let's change this to orange. Okay, and refresh. Now you see this first child of this particular div element, the paragraph, the class, the group, whatever you say, gets the color of red. Similarly, if I do this as a last child, it should be red for the fourth one. Okay, so this is how you use first child and last child, and the last one is the import. So let's say here this orange is defined at the root level. Okay, and then we have okay, so let's define p again, and then let's say color blue. Okay, let's see what happens first, and then we'll see the important tag. So now you see all the paragraph gets the blue color. Okay, but this last child is still getting the red color. Okay, but if I add important here, okay, what will happen? Let's see. Oh, so you see this one also gets the blue color. So what is happening here? So even if we have the cascading and ultimately this should have been applied, but because of this important syntax here, it is actually overriding. Okay, so when I say here that refrain to use this important, because it ultimately you can see here, right, as soon as you put important, it becomes important and it will override anything you have, and then ultimately it might create an issue while you are debugging. So okay, so avoid using important if you can. All right, so this is pretty much it for this particular video, and it was just to give you an overview like how actually a style sheet works and what is the cascading thing and how it actually works. So it was moreover on a couple of selectors that we have shown you here, and what is the order of style that gets applied. Okay, and then how you actually, what is the syntax. All right, so this is for the very beginning of the style sheet. More videos yet to come. Okay, do not forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.